So I'm here to talk about a topic that is, I've actually stopped calling myself an entrepreneur because I feel I'm so much in mission mode that I need to solve this problem before I'm, if or unless I'm plucked out of the race and I stop running. It's become so much of a passion. And let me start with a fact that kind of keeps me going. It's been 8 years into the journey, and it still makes me wake up in the morning and run to work. Just yesterday, 260 million school-going kids in India spent 5 hours in school, notionally, physically there or not, but 5 hours was dedicated or earmarked in their lives, which is over 1.3 billion hours of human time spent in one day in just one country. Incidentally, 1.3 billion is the number of children in the world that are still stuck in an old, sort of stagnant, archaic education system that is still prepping students largely for a rote learning kind of a scenario, even in applied subjects like science and maths. So the question is, what is the way out, with education? Like, how do you really transform this industry, and what can government and policy do to make a big difference in enabling that transformation for us? So let me start by, leveraging that factoid that I just shared, which is not really like a big surprise. We all know there are 260 million kids. We know they spend 5 hours at school. We never just multiply the number and realize that 1.3 billion hours of humanity were spent yesterday going to school. And in fact, 13,000 hours of my life were spent in school. And to what end? So I think the first order of business for any company that is trying to build something for personalization or learning outcomes is to make this endeavor a success. Every student who goes there, every parent who deploys their savings or does anything to put their kids through school deserves to see some kind of measure of success. Now, what that success looks like, is another question. The second order of business is to start where we are today in the current education system, but mainstream success in a more conventional sense towards a direction that is more relevant in the future. So start with current mainstream education and move our way towards 21st century skills. It's not enough today to know the date of the American Civil War of Independence. It's more important to be able to understand than what would have happened to the history of the United States if the Confederates had won. And even more important, it is to understand, to apply your own agency to the problem and say, what would you have done if you were in the decision maker's seat at the time when the Civil War was being fought? What momentous decision would you take as a problem solver? Shifting agency more and more towards the learner. So the first problem that I mentioned was mainstreaming success in the current education system. The second problem is mainstreaming success towards what matters, which is transitioning from the current education system towards a set of competencies that make more sense, like being an entrepreneur, being a leader, being an empath, being a problem solver, things that machines will not do well come the next decade. The third problem is to mainstream inclusive access to such a platform if we have the ability to be able to build it. And mainstream access, including multiple axes, like, for example, devices, access to electricity, access to, specially able or differently abled people, and help every person individually improve on their own access using AI and personalization. I'll tell you a secret. Imbibe never started as an education AI company. Imbibe started as a product company trying to solve the problem of helping every child improve. In fact, when I was setting up the company, I wanted to set up an NGO because I was like, I just want people to find the best version of themselves. But somebody told me, what about scale? How big is big? I said, well, big is a universe. He says, well, then you need to think about tech. And I know everybody's seen this documentary called The Social Dilemma, and how nefariously people are able to influence, folks through technology into doing things that subconsciously shape the mind. Well, education is an excellent application of this kind of tech where you can use personalization to actually individually hone the upward mobility of every single student through a certain trajectory of learning outcomes or skilling outcomes, if you will. So when I started out, it was a product company trying to identify blind spots that help students improve. And over a period of time, we discovered a bunch of very interesting things that led to the translation of that endeavor into an artificial intelligence platform. So let's sort of take a step back and understand why AI is even relevant to education. After all, this is an AI forum. So the first thing is that if you really start to think about personalization, you need to have a predicate to the journey. That why is data really even important? Because the largest data platforms in the world are actually involved in delivering, whatever they deliver on the back of some kind of a continuum. The continuum in our case is lifelong learning. So for the learner of today, we're still suffering through a system where you go through industry cycles step by step by step, in the sense that you go to school, you go to pre-K, you go to college, you go to university, and then you keep breaking and reconstructing your data and context as you consume information by and by. The problem is when you do that, you minimize your chance at becoming the best learner possible at everything, because learning, like everything else in life, is actually a continuum. So we saw this amazing opportunity to build an AI platform that actually unifies learning context and focuses on constructing a journey that actually helps the learner maximize the import of whatever they absorb over the years as a continuum. This gave birth to what we call the knowledge graph, an incredible galaxy of concepts that actually proves that learning is three-dimensional and it's connected. And therefore, multiple personalization journeys can be delivered on a per student basis to help them improve in whatever context possible. If that context is a standardized test, you can help them, you can help any learner crack it. For example, we've helped tribal students in Rajasthan with hitherto no digital experience actually crack some of the toughest exams in the world. Or you can deliver simply better concept mastery. For example, teaching multiplication to a fourth grader using the personalization that a graph like this delivers. But then what's next? When you tag a graph like this to more than just the learning concepts, you tag it to the skills that the learning inherently delivers. For example, thinking about something like angular momentum as an abstract thinking concept, and then tying that abstract thinking into actually interpreting a large data set, you start to take learners through intelligent item design from a base context, which is anchored in textbooks that largely just deliver rote and comprehension-based Bloom's levels of learning, and you take them towards becoming thinkers and problem solvers. So effectively, the sum total of what we've discovered as a company in our AI is that the problem is to replicate the teacher brain in understanding the student and understanding the content, and doing it at the depth where you're able to far supersede a single teacher's imagination or visualization of both the content problem and the student on three vectors. Number one, multiple layers. Number two, incredible depth of forensic understanding of student behavior, right from interpreting click streams to visually interpreting their faces as they engage with content. And number three, to an incredible depth, tagging and categorizing content over terabytes of data that we've now collected, and putting all of these together to build intelligent recommendations. So what we're really saying is that we don't like the industry where education is split into multiple boards, where each of the boards, like the State Board of Maharashtra, Punjab, Central Board, etc., devise their own syllabi. It breaks agency for the learner. It splits the education problem into a syllabus and curriculum problem, which is the wrong way to look at it. We don't like the fact that skilling is a separate ministry, because effectively skilling is a very natural derivative of core education, and it all has to be connected around the learner. So if I really think about policy interventions that would be really helpful for a company like ours and other people endeavoring to create learning outcomes in this space, it would be access to data and actually having a common forum where curriculum makers and policy makers come together to start to design an education system and an industry that is built around the learner and learner outcomes, and pools data and pools content in a way that it maximizes the way a student can take more and more away from the interaction with the system, rather than looking at a separate system for teachers, a separate system for students, a separate system for skilling, and a separate system for K-12 curriculum, which is further divided into 26 separate subcategories that completely shift the conversation in a negative direction around grades and in a specific curriculum, rather than talking about knowledge acquisition at a higher level, which is what humanity needs today. So whoever is listening as a policymaker or a member of industry, What I just like you to leave you guys with as a thought is that the MRI machine's advent in the healthcare industry made better doctors and better outcomes happen for healthcare. AI has created that moment in education. And the biggest opportunity for all of us to make the biggest impact is to actually end the divisiveness in the way we look at education delivery to the learner and focus on how we look at the human body as a holistic sense, with all systems coming together to make a person, simply just be alive. Thank you.